On a bustling afternoon in downtown New York, the number 3 bus was packed with people. Even though it was slightly past rush hour, it was still difficult to find a seat. As the bus stopped at a station and the doors opened, an elderly man with a cane slowly boarded. He was Mr. William Brown, a man in his early 80s. Despite using a cane, he stood tall with a dignified presence. At first glance, he seemed like an ordinary old man, but a closer look revealed an unusual intensity in his eyes. His action of tagging the bus card was precise and smooth. "Oh, it's crowded," Mr. Brown muttered as he looked towards the priority seating area. A young man with earphones was sitting there, legs stretched out, engrossed in his smartphone. The young man, James, wore a black t-shirt that revealed faint tattoos on his arms, giving him a somewhat intimidating appearance. The bus passengers glanced at him nervously, but no one said a word. Mr. Brown slowly approached the priority seating area. As the bus jerked suddenly, he held onto the handle tightly. His arthritis made it difficult for him to stand for long periods. "Young man, this is a priority seat. Could you let me sit?" Mr. Brown asked in a polite and quiet voice. James glanced up briefly, took out one earphone and smirked. "Hey, old man, does it have your name on it?" "First come, first served," he scoffed. James, with a cocky smile, returned his gaze to his phone. Although slightly taken aback, Mr. Brown composed himself and asked again, calmly, "My legs are a bit weak. It's hard for me to stand for too long." James chuckled dismissively and stretched his legs further. "If you're sick, take a taxi. This is my spot." James's voice echoed in the bus, making the atmosphere even more uncomfortable. The bus driver glanced at the situation in the rearview mirror, but stayed silent when James glared menacingly. A heavy silence hung over the bus. Mr. Brown sighed deeply. Something flickered in his eyes briefly, but he resignedly gripped the handle tightly. The bus continued to sway, and Mr. Brown struggled to maintain his balance with each lurch. Some passengers looked at Mr. Brown with sympathy, but James's intimidating demeanor kept them from speaking up. Mr. Brown's wrinkled hands held his cane more firmly. His worn military boots, slightly peeking from under his pants, glinted in the sunlight. He stood there, enduring the situation silently, a testament to the many hardships he had overcome in his past. As the bus took a sharp turn, it swayed violently, and Mr. Brown had to hold on tighter, feeling the pain in his joints, but showing no change in expression. One passenger whispered to another, "That old man gives off a strange vibe. Wasn't he in the army?" Mr. Brown's lips curled into a faint smile. Though many years had passed, his military posture and spirit were hard to hide. But James kept his rude attitude. "Hey, old man, why don't you just stand at the back?" James's words made the passengers even more uncomfortable. A middle-aged woman started to stand, but sat back down under James's sharp gaze. Meanwhile, Mr. Brown closed his eyes for a moment, then reopened them, saying softly, "Young man, if you knew who I used to be, you wouldn't speak that way." James sneered provocatively. "What, were you a general or something?" Mr. Brown's gaze sharpened slightly, but quickly returned to normal. He said nothing and gripped his cane more tightly. As the bus swayed again, Mr. Brown struggled to keep his balance. Then James mischievously kicked the bottom of Mr. Brown's cane, taunting him. "Shouldn't you be able to walk without this, old man?" At that, Mr. Brown's eyes changed. He looked at James with a calm but intense gaze. The air in the bus seemed to freeze. "Do you understand what you're saying?" Mr. Brown's voice was low but firm. James, oblivious to the change, continued provocatively. "What, am I wrong? You some sort of special forces?" He reached out to push Mr. Brown, but something unexpected happened. Mr. Brown's hand moved like lightning. In an instant, he grabbed James's wrist and twisted it ever so slightly. "What the?" James's scream filled the bus. His face contorted with pain, and the bus was filled with gasps. "Were you really in special forces, sir?" one passenger asked in astonishment. Holding James's wrist firmly, Mr. Brown quietly replied, "Yes, counterterrorism unit." The bus buzzed with awe. Some passengers expressed their admiration, and others were visibly amazed. James's face showed fear and bewilderment. Mr. Brown remained composed. Years of training had ingrained quick reflexes and precise movements in him. Though old, his skills in handling crisis situations were intact. He applied just enough pressure to teach James a lesson without causing harm. Every eye on the bus was on the two of them. From children to the elderly, everyone watched breathlessly. Sweat beaded on James's forehead as his once arrogant expression faded into fear. He attempted to retaliate, not wanting to lose face, but his movements were predictable to Mr. Brown. Having conducted numerous special operations, Mr. Brown saw through James's intention easily. Before James could react, Mr. Brown swiftly twisted his arm and subdued him on the bus floor with smooth, precise movements, mastering control without unnecessary force. It was the result of training ingrained in him during his Special Forces days. "Ah, my hand!" James's scream echoed again, this time filled with greater pain. His face was drenched in sweat, and his eyes were filled with fear. The situation had completely turned around. Passengers erupted in astonishment, and some began filming the scene with their smartphones. In no time, multiple phones were capturing the moment, and everyone was in awe. Mr. Brown looked down at James and calmly said, "Strength is not for bullying the weak. Think about what you want to protect with your strength." James's eyes wavered, revealing the insecurity and emptiness behind his arrogance. Mr. Brown didn't miss it. He had learned to read people's eyes over his many years. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't realize," James stammered, quickly rising from the priority seat. His voice lacked the arrogance from before, replaced with a mix of confusion, fear, and newfound respect. In the face of Mr. Brown's overwhelming presence and skill, he could no longer maintain his bravado. The bus passengers cheered at the dramatic turn of events. Some began to clap, filling the bus with applause. It was a release of the passengers' pent-up emotions. Mr. Brown nodded slightly and made his way to the priority seat with a steady gait. Even with the cane, he exuded an aura of dignity. He sat quietly, while James, feeling humiliated, didn't know where to stand on the bus. He was flustered under the continued gaze of the passengers, with some still filming him. His face turned red with embarrassment as sweat ran down his face. As the bus approached the next stop, James hurriedly disembarked, his back filled with confusion and shame. The bus doors closed, and his figure disappeared into the street. A sense of small victory spread among the passengers, who exchanged glances and smiles. Their eyes naturally turned to Mr. Brown, who sat quietly looking out the window. His expression was not one of triumph, but of deep contemplation. A young passenger, seemingly a college student in his 20s, approached Mr. Brown with admiration. "Sir, that was incredible. What are Special Forces like?" Mr. Brown looked at the young man, lost in thought. Memories of his military life, the grueling training, the dangerous missions, and the faces of lost comrades flashed through his mind. "Special Forces," Mr. Brown began, his voice steadying as a wave of past memories washed over him. "We are trained to complete missions under extreme conditions, but the most important lesson we learned was knowing when to use our strength and when to hold back." The young man looked at Mr. Brown with respect, and other passengers began to gather around, listening intently to the story of the former Special Forces member. "Thanks to people like you, we can live peacefully," a middle-aged woman expressed her gratitude. Mr. Brown modestly shook his head. "It's not just my doing. Many have done their best in their places. Young folks today serve in the military to protect the country, too." The bus's atmosphere warmed with his words, creating a sense of unity among passengers who usually remained indifferent to one another. A grandmother cautiously asked, "Did you undertake many dangerous missions?" Mr. Brown's eyes momentarily clouded over, recalling countless covert operations and perilous moments. instances where he risked his life for national security and the pain of losing comrades. I can't share those stories here, but I believe that if we all do our best where we are, the world will gradually improve. Though his answer was indirect, the passengers seemed to understand the profound meaning behind his words. Sometimes, silence speaks volumes. A young man who had been engrossed in his smartphone suddenly exclaimed excitedly, "Wow, that video is already on social media. The views are skyrocketing." All eyes turned toward him. The young man showed his phone screen, which displayed a clear recording of Mr. Brown subduing James. The video, titled "Thug on Bus Messes with Legendary Special Forces Grandpa," had already surpassed 1,000 views, with comments pouring in. The passengers marveled at the rapid spread of information in modern society, where a small incident on a bus now reached a wider audience. Mr. Brown felt a bit overwhelmed by the situation. He wasn't one to enjoy being in the spotlight. He was used to quietly carrying out his duties in the shadows. However, he acknowledged the changing times. "The world sure does change fast these days," Mr. Brown remarked, drawing laughter from those around him. The laughter filled the bus warmly, transforming a previously tense space into one of harmony. "Grandpa, I'll send you the video link. Your grandson would be proud," a passenger kindly suggested. Grandpa William nodded with a smile. "That's all right. I'm not accustomed to those gadgets. And what I did isn't something to boast about. I just did what needed to be done," he replied with humility that touched everyone on board. In today's world, small acts are often blown out of proportion. But the irony was that those who truly do extraordinary things rarely boast about them. The bus continued down the road, the scenery of New York City rushing past the windows, with sunlight streaming in, bringing warmth to the interior. Grandpa William sat quietly in the priority seat, gazing out. The passengers around him were still chattering about him. The video uploaded on social media was gaining views and comments rapidly. Among the comments, many expressed admiration for him as a true example of an adult worth emulating. A young woman, appearing to be a college student with a bag full of books, approached him carefully. "Grandpa, I really respect you," she said sincerely. William looked at her with a smile. "Oh, that's nothing. I see you're studying. Working hard?" Surprised by the question, she nodded. "Yes, I'm studying medicine. It's tough, but I want to help people." William's eyes brightened, nodding in approval. "That's wonderful. I helped people by protecting the country, and you'll help them by saving lives, contributing to the world in our own ways. That's what's important." The young woman nodded, deeply touched by his words. Other passengers around them shared the sentiment. It was a moment for everyone to reflect on their roles in life. As the bus approached a major intersection and stopped at a light, they saw busy pedestrians outside, the city's daily life continuing peacefully. Grandpa William found himself lost in thought, recalling his younger days as a Special Forces member and realizing that many still strive unseen to protect their peaceful daily lives. "A strong person is one who can care for others," William said quietly, a message to himself as much as to those around him. The bus fell silent, the weight of his words sinking into everyone's hearts. A middle-aged man paid his respects, saying, "Grandpa, you've taught us an important lesson today. Thank you." Others nodded in agreement. There was a newfound sense of community among the previously indifferent strangers on the bus, now bonded by a shared experience. The signal changed, the bus moved forward, and the driver, having witnessed it all through the rearview mirror, smiled too. In his long career, such touching scenes were rare. "Next stop, City Hall. Please press the bell if you're getting off," announced the bus driver. Grandpa William rose from his seat and pressed the button. As he stood, passengers naturally made way for him, no longer seeing him as just an elderly man with a cane. To them, he was an elder worthy of respect. The bus stopped, and the doors opened. Grandpa William began to descend the steps slowly when a young man got off the bus with him, offering a gentle hand. "Let me help you, Grandpa." Touched by the young man's genuine kindness, William's eyes moistened slightly. He nodded in gratitude. Outside, the sun shone warmly on Grandpa William and the young man, who appeared to be about 25, dressed neatly. "Where are you headed, Grandpa? I can walk with you," the young man offered sincerely. William studied his face, seeing a young man with a pure heart. "It's all right. I was just thinking of stopping by the park for a bit. You must have things to do," William replied, but the young man shook his head. "No, I have plenty of time today. Honestly, I'd like to hear more from you." "My name is James Brown." Grandpa William thought for a moment and then nodded. The two began walking slowly toward the nearby park, James naturally matching William's pace. "How was your time in the Special Forces, Grandpa? It must have been tough," James inquired cautiously. Grandpa William paused, gazing into the distance as memories flooded back. "It was tough, but it was also the most meaningful time of my life. Testing myself in extreme situations, sharing life and death with comrades. I learned what true human relationships are," he said with a voice filled with nostalgia and pride. James listened in awe. "I served in the military too, but Special Forces is a whole different level. Can you tell me about your training?" William smiled. "I can't share everything, but we learned survival in extreme environments, infiltrating enemy lines, hand-to-hand combat. Sometimes we'd go days without sleep on missions." James's eyes widened with respect. "And Grandpa, what you did on the bus earlier was amazing. Despite your age, your reflexes and precision were incredible." William chuckled softly. "The body ages, but skills ingrained in you never fade. Of course, I'm not what I used to be, but the young man wasn't truly dangerous, just someone wanting to show off." James nodded deeply, understanding the wisdom in William's words. They reached the park and sat on a quiet bench, sunlight filtering through the leaves above, casting gentle patterns on their faces. "Grandpa, your words on the bus keep resonating with me, that a strong person is one who can care for others. It's a value that seems forgotten in today's world," James said earnestly. William nodded in deep agreement. "True strength isn't about oppressing others, but lifting them up. It's the most important lesson I learned in the Special Forces." He paused, then continued. "In our unit, we had a member nicknamed Eagle. Physically, he was the best, but he always showed off and belittled others. One day, he got injured during a mission, and it was the small-framed member he often mocked who risked his life to save him. After that, Eagle changed completely, realizing what true strength is." James was deeply moved by the story, his eyes filled with respect and a newfound eagerness to learn. "Grandpa, you've given me a precious lesson. I'll always remember it." William smiled warmly, gently patting James's shoulder. At that moment, an alert sounded on James's phone. "Oh, excuse me," he said, checking it. His eyes widened in surprise. "Grandpa, the video from the bus is really going viral. It's already over 100,000 views." William only smiled. The power of modern technology never ceased to amaze him. It hadn't even been an hour, yet so many had seen the video. "The world moves fast now, things we couldn't have imagined in my time." James showed the phone to William, the screen filled with comments, mostly praising and respecting him. "This grandpa is a true hero. Young people should learn from his true strength. So this is the spirit of the Special Forces. Everyone respects you, Grandpa," James said, his voice filled with admiration. William shook his head humbly, though a flicker of pride crossed his eyes. The values he had upheld for so long were still reaching people, bringing him joy. "I just acted as I was taught to. Nothing special," he said. James shook his head, his gaze earnest. "There are too many who ignore and belittle the weak. Having someone like you show true strength and care is a beacon of hope." Reflecting deeply, William realized that while the world had changed, the essence of humanity hadn't. People still longed for true strength, courage, and compassion. The sky beyond the park began to turn red with the setting sun. William rose slowly. "I should head home now. I enjoyed spending time with you today," he said. James stood too, hesitating a moment before asking, "Grandpa, May I come visit you again? I'd love to hear more of your stories. William's face lit up with a warm smile. Of course, you're always welcome. I live near the senior center by the park, and I usually spend my mornings here. James beamed with gratitude, bowing respectfully. Thank you so much. I'll definitely visit again. They left the park, standing on the sidewalk, the crimson hue of sunset spreading between the city buildings. William, leaning on his cane, began walking toward the senior center. Let me accompany you, James offered again, but William shook his head. It's fine. This distance I can manage. You should go on your way. Respectfully, James bowed, watching until William safely crossed the street before turning to leave. As William walked, he reflected on the day's events, the incident on the bus, his conversations with the young people, and meeting James. Though unexpected, perhaps this was another mission in his twilight years, passing down the values they had protected to future generations. This, too, might be the last mission of an old soldier. A new resolve grew in his heart. He could no longer fulfill duties as a Special Forces member, but he could contribute by sharing his experiences and wisdom. Approaching the senior center, the building bathed in the glow of the sunset welcomed him. Entering the lobby, he found a few seniors watching TV and chatting. They greeted him warmly. "William, where did you go today?" asked Mrs. Johnson from the neighboring room. "Just my usual walk-around," he replied with a smile, not mentioning the day's events, as he never liked boasting about his past or achievements. However, news had already spread in the center. "William, come here! You're on TV!" another senior called excitedly. Surprised, William approached the TV, seeing the bus video being covered on the news. The anchor's voice filled the room. This afternoon, a video of a former Special Forces soldier subduing a young troublemaker on a city bus has gone viral on social media. Dubbed the Special Forces Grandpa, this gentleman, the seniors, astonished, looked at William. He felt overwhelmed, uncomfortable with the attention, having spent a lifetime completing missions quietly in the shadows. James had become somewhat of a local celebrity. His friends at the senior center couldn't stop praising him, and he humbly nodded as he made his way to his room. Once inside and with the door closed, he finally let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. It had been a day that awakened his long-dormant soldier instincts. The sky outside his window was darkening, and stars were beginning to show. James sat on his bed and pulled out an old photo album, filled with memories from his days in the Special Forces. As he looked at the black and white photos of himself and his comrades, he fell into deep thought. How much time had passed since then? Those young men, who had once vowed to protect their country, were now either gray-haired or had passed away. "Emma, if you saw me today from above, you would have smiled," he thought, speaking in his mind to his friend who had fallen during an operation long ago. Emma had been his closest ally, the one who had sacrificed herself for him during their last mission. That memory still lingered painfully in his heart. The old military watch on his desk ticked steadily as he lay down, staring at the ceiling. Today's events reminded him that he was still alive, and that he still had something to contribute to the world. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual. Opening the window, fresh air rushed into the room, invigorating him. He decided to do some morning exercises he hadn't done in a long time. Although his joints weren't as flexible as they used to be, he slowly followed the basic movements from his military days. After breakfast, James headed out from the senior center towards the park where he had sat with William the day before. The morning sun shone warmly on his white hair. Upon arriving at the park, he was surprised to see several young people already sitting on the bench. Among them was William, who immediately stood up to greet him. "Good to see you, sir," William said warmly. The other young people looked at James with eyes full of respect. "These are my friends. After hearing your story, they really wanted to meet you." James was surprised, but greeted them with a warm smile. He sat on the bench and began sharing his experiences and wisdom with the young people. He talked about his days in the Special Forces and the important lessons he'd learned in life, the true meaning of strength, and the importance of considering others. The young listeners paid close attention to his words, their eyes filled with respect and a thirst for knowledge. It was then that James realized that his life and experiences were now a precious gift he could pass on to the next generation. Birds flew overhead, and the sound of children laughing in the distance could be heard. It was a moment to appreciate the peace of everyday life and to reaffirm the value of the time he had dedicated to preserving it. A strong person is someone who can care for others, James's words carried on the spring breeze throughout the park. They weren't just words, but a life truth realized by a veteran, destined to be passed on to the new generation and live on for a long time. The warm spring sun gently shone upon the scene of the veteran and the young people together,